Well, thank you everybody for coming to Conservation Conversations. We're really excited about this conversation tonight. I think it's kind of a perfect jab at generational arguments. You know, we all try to fight with one another. However, we're all still trying to work for clean air, clean water, and public lands and stuff like that. So I think this will be a really fun conversation. To start off, my name is Bridget Sanderson. I am the Director of Environment Missouri, based out of Kansas City, Missouri. And I'll kind of give a little bit of an overview about why we do this, even though I feel like a lot of people have heard this spiel a lot now. But for anybody who hasn't, Kate and I started Conservation Conversations actually a year ago. It is our 1-year anniversary of Conservation Conversations. So we've been doing this for a full year. We've learned so much. But we started this, right when strict work from home orders, the pandemic was getting really scary. And Kate and I really wanted to sit down and start talking with our friends that are environmentalists, people we didn't know, just to continue a conversation about the great outdoors and love of nature and the love of the earth. And so we thought that we would start sharing it with all of you. So that's where Conservation Conversations came in. So we do have 5 wonderful panelists. I am counting Kate and I today because we are considered the millennial group. And so I'll let Kate kind of take over from here, but we will take questions at the end. And so if you have any questions in the Q&A function if you have any questions for our panelists, please stick them in the Q&A function or the chat function if you're on the Zoom webinar. And then if you're on Facebook Live, just put it in the comment section. And I will let my co-host, my number one friend, to go ahead and introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I'm Kate. I'm the Director of Environment Maryland. And, like Bridget said, over the course of the last year, we've learned so much from so many different people. And I think what Bridget and I were talking about in planning this webinar was everyone we've talked to has come at it from somewhat of a different place, whether it's a different background or a different perspective. And what I've learned over the last year is that there is no wrong way to do activism. And there's no right way. There's just your way. And it's been really inspiring to see how many people are living their work in this very authentic and inspiring way. And so I think what you'll find is our panelists tonight are all people who really embody and represent that. So for tonight, Earth Day Through the Ages, 4 Generations of Activism, we're going to be having a panel discussion on everything from why are you doing this to what are you excited for, right? So we're going to kind of cover the gamut, but the thing I wanted to preface with as well is we are all coming to this work and accessing this work from very unique places. So, and I'll let you all talk about this. Pat, I know, was the world's best nurse. Shane has a bevy of experiences that range from being an elected official to a ski coach. So he's done literally everything. Lisa is a student at a time when you could be working on anything, right? Like, holy moly, there's so much for you to do. Bridget was a soil scientist, and I was an elementary school teacher and a farmer. So we're all coming at this from different places. And I think that's one of the things that's going to make this discussion awesome. So I'm excited. So Bridget, should we just launch into our first question, or to our intros? And that is the first question, actually. So let's go to keep things orderly. Let's go in descending generational order. So starting with Pat, ending with Lisa, and take maybe 5 minutes to tell us, who are you, where are you working, and what influenced you to be what you're doing what you're doing. And is there some memory from an Earth Day past that always comes back to you around this time every year? So Pat, I will let you start us off.
Okay, yes, I'm Pat Hersey, and I'm founder of Less Plastic, Please. It was a group that started literally around my dining room table, and we were just saying how much we hated plastic. And we literally didn't know what we were doing. We just decided that we wanted to get rid of plastic. So we got a bag bill, and now we got a plastic reduction bill. And so I really feel like you can't tell me that, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. Because if I can do it, you can do it. So find your passion and find something that you really care about, that you're willing to fight for, and you can get it done. You know, if somebody says somebody should do something, always remember that, you know, you're that somebody to do something. As a boomer, my first environmental memory was the Don't Be a Litter Bug campaign. Some people have heard of that. But I am proud to say that campaign turned me into an environmentalist. My little 5-year-old brain took it very seriously, that I think everyone should not be littering. And it makes me sweet. It's a sweet revenge, per se, to say that the Keep America Beautiful campaign, which I have nothing good to say about, it must be so sad that they turned a rabid environmentalist into me. So that's, and as Earth Day, I do a lot of tabling events. There's a lot of good memories with those type of things. But I really consider every day Earth Day. I know that sounds so quaint, but I really do. So move it along.
That's awesome. That's great. Shane, what you got?
Thanks, Kate. Pat, I agree with you. I think every day is Earth Day. At least the Earth doesn't know there's an Earth Day, right? It's just here. We made up Earth Day. But anyway, I'm Shane Robinson. I'm the executive director of Trash Free Maryland. So we're focused on reducing trash and litter pollution in the state through policy changes and through programmatic work. How I got into it, I guess, you know, starting from as a child, I spent a lot of my formative years growing up in Bolivia and Brazil, and there was faced with a lot of, I mean, one, nature, it was beautiful, but then also seeing what I didn't know was environmental injustice at the time, but were clearly environmental injustice issues. Land use issues where people living in poverty were put, and starting to make those connections, and then moved to Nevada later. And you're just seeing a lot of the also beautiful places, but then things affected by mining, and became more and more interested in conservation through those experiences as a kid. Then in sports and just for fun and purely selfish reasons, got really into outdoor activities. And over time, those two worlds kind of came together and ended up now, well, first being in, after doing a number of things, like in the Peace Corps, did some environmental work there, and then did my master's studying sustainable development, which taught me that nobody knows what sustainable development is. So decided to go into policy after that, thinking that, well, if we change policies, that's how we can really affect environmental change, rather than just trying to do, you know, put band-aids on things, like do all the trash cleanups in the world aren't gonna solve the problem of our policy failures. So ran for the House of Delegates in Maryland, which for people not in Maryland, it's a state representative. So did that for 8 years, and then discovered that to get reelected, apparently you need more votes than the other people. So went no longer in office now, and went to work for Trash Free Maryland. It's been great. We're doing a lot of good work, I hope. We're trying to, right now, the Maryland legislature's in session until Monday, so we're really busy with that. And then, of course, Earth Day is coming up. I think the other part of the question is your first Earth Day. Do you remember about Earth Day? You know, my first Earth Day that I remember was, is that a question, Kate, or did I make that up? Okay.
I'm realizing what a mammoth question I threw at you with like 7 different parts. So it is, yeah, but you don't have to answer it.
Well, I was trying to think, and I'm like, well, I remember the first Earth Day I remember was in college, and I think I was playing ultimate frisbee on the quad or something, and it was like, yay, it's Earth Day, woo! You know, didn't do anything particularly positive for the world, other than, you know, it was a pretty low carbon footprint event, I guess, but otherwise, unfortunately, not much. Now it's part of my professional career, so Earth Day becomes a completely different hat, right?
Definitely, definitely. Bridget, I'm gonna let you go because these answers have been amazing, and I feel like I've known you both for such a long time, but both of those answers, I'm like, oh my God, why didn't I know that? Or I want to ask them about that. So this is great.
Yeah. Well, so yes, I'm the familiar face on conservation conversations. I'm sure I have discussed many times about my background. But yeah, I originally came from the world of soil science. I worked as a soil scientist for about 8 years in Kansas. We did do some environmental work because soil is, just the I don't even know how to call it, like the mixture of like what we need to survive on this earth, like it's so essential, and has so many different implications. I think if you ask my mother, she would never have said that I would go into science or in earth science. But when I look back on my life, there was a really formidable field trip that I actually had, as I believe it was in junior high at some point. We went and actually tagged monarch butterflies because I grew up in the Kansas City area. So monarch butterflies are, you know, they were a lot more prominent back then. My little brain when I was in junior high could see monarchs for the eye can see when we went out to go help them. But yeah, we were able to act as citizen scientists, and we were able to help these scientists tag monarchs, and we were able to watch our monarchs travel through the United States down to Mexico on their path. And it was just one of those really formidable moments in my life where I was like, oh, this is really cool way to study the earth. And it's, a monarch butterfly is really characteristic. I have a butterfly up here. And so, teenage years were going by. I had a lot of ideas for my future, but then fell into a geology course for general ed, and fell in love with it. And as I was working as a soil scientist, I, very much like Shane, started realizing that I was thinking that policy was actually the way to do this. We have a wonderful group out here that is a group of scientists that help to explain climate issues in a scientific lens to legislators, but that wasn't really a thing at least that I knew of when I was in my lab. And I really enjoy talking with people. Lab work is really lonely. So I decided to become an environmental advocate. And that's how I kind of came to the helm of Environment Missouri, and just been loving it ever since. And I don't really remember a very specific Earth Day, kind of like Shane. I feel like I remember really noting it like when I was in college, but it wasn't until I started getting into the more political realm that, I would notice that there were these community events to do like river cleanups and planting trees, and politicians love them to death. They love those pictures, they love those PR moments. And so I've gone out with a lot of friends who are elected officials to do these. And they're some of my favorite things now. I love getting dirty and planting trees and everything. So yeah, I don't think I have one specific Earth Day that's like incredibly memorable. It's just every day is Earth Day, like you two have said. So I'm going to go ahead and let Kate go now.
All these stories have been so good. And I just want to shout out on the Facebook Live. There's a really nice comment from Lynn that says, "Thank you for this. We need to hear this." And I just saw that, was monitoring questions, and I just want to thank you for saying that. So like I said, my background is really in agriculture. My mom is on here, and I grew up on a farm. And so grew up very connected to the land. And as she will remember, grew up in the summer, if it didn't rain, tough luck. You're not showering and you're not washing your clothes, and we are saving what's in the well. So growing up with that connection to land and to food, so similar to Bridget, kind of the building blocks of life, I was really shocked when I got to college and learned about industrial agriculture and corporate polluters. I was like, wait, what? So that was news to me, that anyone would sort of commodify the earth in that way and be in a place of to not have that relationship to it and that respect of it, was shocking to me. From there, I did go into education. I became a teacher and lived in the Mississippi Delta, which I saw firsthand. That's Monsanto Central and the cotton in the soy, the crop planes dropping all the Roundup. And, our water tests showed lead, arsenic, cyanide, and the source was agricultural runoff. And I was like, I grew up in agriculture. This doesn't make sense. From there, I worked on farms with children. So the combo of the farming and ag, and then in an elementary school called the Sustainability Academy. And what led me to policy, though, kind of because I'm in this world and I'm educating and I'm thinking about it and thinking about, what do we do? Education is awesome. And that's really my point of access from it. But I had a student, a first grader, say, Miss Freeman, I saw this YouTube video and I'm never going to be as old as you. I was like, explain? He was like, well, climate change, like when I'm your age, none of this is going to be here. And I was like, well, hold my beer, Pukar, because I'm about to go do something about that. So that's how I came to find this job with Environment Maryland and advocacy. And so now I think I am sort of this, similar to Bridget, this weird fusion of advocacy and just wanting to talk to people about it, and still an educator and still love the farming work. But over the course of these last few decades of this, I think I've just learned, like Pat said, we're the ones that do something about it. And I remember, so probably my first Earth Day memory is being in high school, and very early got labeled as a hippie, and I didn't mean to. I had no idea that was not intentional, and yet here we are. And I had on my little Earth Day shirt, and I just remember being like, walking outside to plant a tree and thinking, I can't think of anything more important than this and protecting this, because everything else I want to do depends on a healthy planet. So that's my tale. And now we get to hear from Lisa. I'm so excited.
Hello, thank you for having me. My name's Lisa. I am, I guess, the Gen Zer, although I do identify as a cusper, but for the purposes of this panel, I'll be Gen Z. And right now I am a campus organizer with Osberg students. So I work with the student PERGs. I'm based in Oregon. I just graduated college last June. I studied political science. Thank you. But I am now doing this work training students to be effective activists, and we're actually working on a renewable energy campaign right now. But I wanted to start with my first Earth Day and then kind of zoom backwards into how I actually started being interested in the environment. But my first and really only big Earth Day memory was in elementary school. We all got little tree saplings. And I remember it was the most exciting day ever. And I walked home really carefully with my little tree with a pot of soil. And then my dad and I chose the perfect place in our yard to plant it. And I made a fence to protect it from the bunnies. And that's really the only big Earth Day I remember, but it was so influential on me. And I was like, oh, it's my tree. This is what I can do. But I think my interest in the environment started even before that. So I grew up in Minnesota, and every summer my family would go up to this, yes, Midwest. We would go up to this family camp in northern Minnesota. We started going up when I was 3 or 4, so before I can even remember. And at the beginning of each week, the staff would do this fun, silly skit. Usually it was Wizard of Oz or the Beatles. But one year there was this big drought in northern Minnesota. And so the skit was based on this person learning about the drought and what they could do about it. And the mantra, he was picking up clues. I don't really remember. But the mantra was, the woods need a rainfall. And they kept saying that over and over. And you might be wondering how I remember the exact phrasing of this mantra 15 years later. And it's because I was so impacted by this. By this point, I loved the North Woods more than anything. And I was so scared that it would be threatened by this drought. So I went home and I wrote in my diary, the woods need a rainfall, and I circled it. And then every single diary entry from the whole year, it ended with the woods need a rainfall, and I circled it. And I don't know what I was thinking, if that would, I was willing the drought to end. But I was so connected to nature and the environment, and I just wanted to do something to help. And I think as I've gotten older, I mean, I'm 22, so I'm not that old, but now I've kind of moved from, oh, I'm going to will this change to like, oh, I actually can do something about this, and I can do so, like make my career, base my life around actually doing something beyond just willing change to happen. So that's my story. I also think it kind of speaks to, I don't know if we're into the generational stuff yet, but I think it's kind of speaks to like my generation. Like we joined this conversation way deep into the conversation where climate change was already a big problem, and that's what I grew up with. So that is my story. Thank you for having me.
I love that, Lisa, especially, yeah, it's just, you guys have been fighting this since day one. I think that, millennials as well, but it was really easy to ignore when we were younger. So to kind of go off of that, it was a really great way to end your intro. I would kind of like to start the question off with how have you seen your advocacy shift over your career? And I would like to kind of go through generationally again, just because I think that it's going to be quite a bit different. And I think that this also kind of plays into the fact that we all come from incredibly different backgrounds. But yeah, Pat, let's start with you. How have you seen your advocacy shift over your career? And, have you seen other shifts in the issues around environmentalism or even in public discourse?
Sure. Well, I was one of those people that people would look at me oddly when I would bring my reusable bags into the shopping stores. So that was happening. Yeah, it's amazing when you look back on that. But just within this small span of time, like I just started Less Plastic Please a little more than 3 years ago. And honestly, it was not on anyone's radar. It wasn't later until the year that people really started saying, big companies were saying that, organizations were saying, this isn't right. We need to do something about plastic pollution. And just in this little bit of time since I started Less Plastic Please, the information that you're reading, the medical impacts, the health impacts of people and animals because of plastic is just, I feel just in that small period of time has exploded to the point where it's really, truly frightening. And, because I started this just to get rid of plastic bags, and here I am. Oh, now we're going to do this. Now we're going to do this. So, but yeah, I mean, I feel like when I was a teenager and just cared about who my boyfriend was and what kind of bike I had. And, and it's like, I was always truly, I was still little miss, don't be a litter bug, of course, but it always did. I felt like if I did everything I needed to do to make the world better, then everybody else is doing what they need to do. And so everything's good. So, it's really frighteningly eye-opening right now what's going on. And so we need like all hands on deck. So I'm going to fight at my end, but we all need to fight hard.
Shane, I would love to hear this from your perspective as well as the Gen Xer.
Okay, the Gen Xer. Reality Bites. Anybody remember that one from Gen X, that movie? Anyway, yeah, so I guess I came into this inspired by things that had happened in generations before me, like the Silent Spring from the 60s, a lot of work that people were waking up and starting to put things in place then and before my working career, things like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, policy that just said, this is bad, so we're going to not allow it, right? We'll just stop it. We're going to limit it. I mean, Nixon started the EPA, for crying out loud. If you want to talk about a bipartisan time for the environment, when I came into it and when I was started to really get interested when I was in college, things had shifted. It was the beginning of the Clinton years, deregulation was happening, and there was a shift towards market-based approaches for the environment. And I think we've been in that phase for a long time. A lot of my career has been trying to deal with policies that try to have their cake and eat it, where, you know, you want to limit pollution by maybe a market-based approach, right? Where you sell credits to pollute by not polluting another area of land, and you have the idea of future pollution being mitigated, and then so it's a lot of smoke and mirrors, a lot of policy that we won't win any awards for when history looks back on us in the future. I think that's changing now. I think people are starting to wake up. You see a lot of carbon trading things that are still being touted and are happening. You still see a lot of programs. I'm even involved with some with planting trees for carbon offsets, things that have some merit to them, but ultimately aren't what we should be doing, which is just curbing the activity in the first place that's causing the harm. I think we're moving back there. I think the generations after Generation X are more willing to say, no, enough's enough. We're not going to do this, and we can't all get rich off of cleaning up the environment necessarily. That's not the idea. You know, capitalism is not going to solve an ecological problem. I think that's what I'm starting to hear now, and that gives me some hope. It could be too little too late, we'll see, but it's been a marked change over the last few years, and this matches with what Pat is saying about, you know, the interest in plastics in the last few years. I think spans over the broad section of environmental issues that people are concerned with. I hope that concern turns into actual action, and I hope that action turns into outcomes which are positive. And things are getting darker and darker. Like my generation, I probably need to turn a light on. Otherwise, like all the Gen Xers, I'll just be in the dark. I'm going to go do that now.
That's a wonderful Shane. Yes, it does look a little ominous right now. Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of speak a little bit on the Millennial Generation, and then Kate, you know, if you have anything else to add as well. And kind of reiterating Pat and Shane's point, I feel like growing up, it was always about littering, right? And plastic use, but like not to the extent that we actually thought. It was really like, you know, putting, you know, the idea of saving our earth on the individual human. But in fact, like what Shane was pointing at, like we know that a lot of our environmental degradation is happening from large corporations and not individual humans. And so I think, you know, growing up, as a millennial, I think that is one shift that I have definitely seen, where it's like, oh no, we need to actually hold these polluters accountable instead of just placing, you know, that environmental struggle on the individual shoulders. It's just one person can live completely carbon-free life, but that's not going to save our planet, and we know that now. And you know, who knows if that was willful ignorance or not back in the day. You know, who's to say? But yeah, I think that's one of the bigger shifts. And again, going back to my geology background, that was the same thing with my, you know, national and state parks were my classroom. And so that was also very much a part of it. And it wasn't until I graduated from college that I started really diving deep into conservation and energy issues, clean energy issues, especially in utility work. And so I think, to Pat's point, like the amount of information that we have now through social media and just constant information is actually bringing all of this really to light in a really wonderful way. I know the internet can be a nasty place, but also a really great informational dump. So yeah, I think that it's gone from, you have to go pick up your plastic water bottles once you're done, to no, we need to quit using plastic water bottles and never use them again. And I know that the Maryland team here is very focused on plastics, and of course, I think we all should be, but yeah, it's just one of those things, or you know, it was always a big joke, you know, being the generation from the baby boomers of dads, you know, yelling at you to turn your lights off, or, you know, changing the thermostat. You weren't allowed to touch the thermostat, but now like it's less that like I'm trying to save money and I'm more trying to save the earth personally, even though my dad was, very strict about all of that. I know that that's like a pretty big baby boomer stereotype as well. So I don't know, Kate, do you have any other view?
Oh, that's right. And I don't want to take up time just agreeing with everything you guys have said. So Lisa, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was thinking about how the discourse had changed in my years as like a conscious person, the biggest shift that I remember is the shift from global warming to climate change. Because for me, it was always like, oh, there's this big existential thing going on with our environment. But then it was like Inconvenient Truth came out. And I think I was like really, really young, but I was kind of aware about that. And then it shifted from, oh, the climate is warming, there's 2 degrees, to, oh, there's a lot actually that's deeper than just a warming planet. Like there are all of these natural disasters and watershed issues. And so I think that was the biggest shift of like, oh, it's a more holistic change than global warming. And I think too, people in my generation that I'm connected with, we're really focused on like sustainability. So talking too about the systems in place and how we can change those and like stop using plastic altogether. It's like, how do we move forward as a society in a more sustainable way? So I don't really know what the shift is there, because I also think that, I've not been around for as long as y'all have, and like I'm just starting out in my career, but I think there's a more shift into a holistic, like there's this whole change going on and we need to holistically change the whole system. So I think that's the big change I've seen.
Hearing you, there is actually one thing that I completely agree. And I think on that note with waste issues specifically, and maybe this was just me learning, but I think we're at a time now too, where we understand you don't throw anything away, right? There is no away. What is away? Like I think it used to be when things were disposable because it was easy. We're having a picnic, so we're going to use paper plates so we can just throw them away. And I hope now that less and less and less people think that there's just some away. So I think that piece, just that clarity around what's actually going on, has increased. So I want to do a couple just individual questions that we wrote specifically for each of you. And then we are going to move. We've already got audience questions coming in on Facebook, so we'll switch to those. I could talk to you guys forever. Pat, you were, like I said, the world's best nurse for a long time. And how do you think, I've gotten to hear you talk so beautifully about kind of that intersection of public health and plastic issues, but how does that background inform your work now? And do you think that your career as a nurse was part of the inspiration when you were sitting around that kitchen table and thinking about how to start this group? How did that kind of inform you and inspire you to do what you do now?
Yeah, well, in my nursing career, I seem like I always gravitated to the ones that were most fragile. I worked with the elderly, and then I worked with antepartum, labor and delivery, and postpartum, these newborns. And so I think there's something, embedded in nurses that, that sense of truly caring and knowing how delicate the body is, how we have this very delicate balance, or everything goes into disease. And I see the human body is a microcosm of the earth. I think the proportion of water is almost the same, that gentle balance that we have to maintain in the world. And so we're abusing the earth. And you get to the point where if you start taking care of your body or the earth, it starts trying so hard to, come back, and it's giving it a fighting chance. And that's what I feel like the earth, we have to give it a fighting chance. We give it just a little bit, it will fight so hard to come back. But just like with human bodies, if you abuse it for too long, there is no coming back. And that is the harsh reality where we are right now. So we can't let that happen. We can't lose a foot, we can't lose a leg. We have to work hard to find the answers. And of course, I focus on plastic because it encompasses all my concerns, you know, the money issue of it, the litter issue of it, the health issue. I'm a big ocean lover. You know, what it's doing to the ocean literally breaks my heart. And so yeah, so that's where I see that how you treat your body and how you treat the earth should be the same.
Yeah, and as a point to that, we had Brian on Facebook in the comment section he said, or they said, watch Seaspiracy, the movie on Netflix, if you have the stomach for it. It talks about plastic pollution. And I know that my dad also has recently watched it and was very passionate about talking to me about it. I have yet to watch it because I know that I have to set aside a day to do it. But I just wanted to make that note. I know that it's about plastic pollution in the fishing industry as well and how it's destroying our oceans. So I just wanted to make that really quick note because I felt like it went really well with what you were talking about. I want to ask Lisa a question because I think this is relatable to me being in the Midwest and still, you know, having the discussion of if climate change is a real thing with a lot of people, unfortunately. I think it's a lot better than it used to be, but you know, I think that it's a real thing sometimes with generations older than us. So Lisa, can you just kind of speak on what it's like doing this type of work as a younger person? And do you feel like your generation is generally responsive to your message or even more responsive to it?
Yeah, great question. I think in general, I mean, to be honest, the circles that I encompass are very much like, we know climate change is real and we need to do everything we can to solve it. I do think that there's this broader sense of responsibility that most of my generation holds, of like, this is the future that we're inheriting and we need to do something to protect it. And so I think, you know, because of that, and because we've seen all of these horrible natural disasters and all of these like really horrible summers, like in Oregon last summer, we had like a devastating wildfire season. I think because of that, there is a lot of receptiveness to this message. I think probably more than in older generations. Like, I know that it's also super like transpartisan, of like, climate change is the biggest issue of our time. And I think people's solutions to that might look a little different, and people's perspectives on whose fault it is or what we should do to solve it maybe varies. But I think in general, you know, as young people, like, we are pretty excited and committed to doing this work. Again, I think I might be biased just because of the circles that I hold, but yeah, I think in general, it's like, we are doing this work together. Like, it doesn't matter what your background is, like, we need to do something to solve it.
That's exciting to hear. I'm glad to hear it. Shane, you mostly already answered the question that I had drafted specifically for you, so I'm going to edit it a little bit to let you expand upon it. Originally, the question was, like you said, you were a former delegate, and I was going to ask you to touch on the power of legislation and the legislature as a tool, but you already did that. You already talked about how important that is. So instead, what I'll ask is, as someone who is working in the legislature, who is doing some lobbying and working with legislators, for the people that are tuning in with us tonight who might not be in that role, what is, do you think, maybe one or two of the most powerful things that our listeners can do as constituents to help encourage their representatives to do the right thing and to pass these important bills like the bag ban?
Well, you know, I'll give my 2 cents on that, but we haven't passed the bag bill yet. So clearly whatever I'm doing hasn't worked yet. So I don't know how good my advice is going to be. I do know some things that are helpful though. I mean, very few people, as an everyday resident of a community, have a relationship with their local elected officials and their state level elected officials. Many people follow national politics, and I think it's even been more so with the death of the local newspaper and the decrease in access to local news media. People see more of what's going on at the national level. Because of that, oftentimes people aren't aware of who actually represents them at the state level, and state legislatures hold a lot of power over what happens in a state in terms of, well, and we're talking about environmental policy, so we can just stop at environmental policy. But if you take the time to get to know your local representatives and your state representatives, it's going to, they'll listen to you, because not that many people actually do it. I mean, you would be probably one of several dozen people that they would have regular relationships with. You know, if you have very active state senators and representatives, they might know a few hundred people that are their constituents. But if you're one of those, it's worth a lot more than just your vote. Your vote's very important. You have to do it, especially in local and state elections. Well, then all of them are important, but where margins for a vote are close, you need a vote. But beyond that, if you start writing and then go down to your state capital, go there, have a meeting, tell your representatives what's important to you. They will take the meeting because they're your constituent, and they're probably in a race next cycle that's going to be in the several hundreds of votes apart. So you matter in that. So talk to them about it, start a relationship. And then when an issue comes up that you care about, make the contact on that issue, and it will mean something. It's not necessarily going to get the bill passed, but it'll have an effect. And there are a lot of, I would say most people don't get into politics because they have this overriding concern about the environment. It's a large array of issues that make people land there. So environmental issues might not be on their radar at all. So you can be one of the people that brings those to light. And of course, there are environmental groups that are doing this. You have Environment Missouri, Environment Maryland, Trash Free Maryland, Less Plastic Please. But our power really comes from being gatekeepers to constituents like you, to the extent that we have a list of people that we're communicating with about what happens on whatever hill we're working on. And then we can leverage you as a constituent to get to that change. So you're the key to this. And you don't, I mean, I don't want to count my organization out of this, but you can skip the nonprofits and go right to the source as well, anytime that you want to. We're useful because we're paying attention to this every day. You are going to work. You're taking care of your families. You're doing all these other things. So then you have to rely on us to be the watchdogs, so to speak. And that's a whole nother story. It's unfortunate that society's built that way, but it is right now. But I would say, yeah, just start simply, start making those relationships. Earlier, Bridget mentioned those photo ops on Earth Day that politicians love to come out to. Go to those, introduce yourself. They want to talk to you, and then they're going to bother you and ask you for money, and just, you can say no, but because they only want the money to try to convince you to vote for them. So the most important thing is the vote.
Yes, all of that. I think Pat and I, and all three of, and Lisa, you do, I think, such great work. The three of us in the legislature were like, the thing that I thought about while you were talking too is how, and I don't think a lot of people realize how local bills and state bills, without those, we don't get these big national movements, right? We don't get the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act at the national level without 8 states banning bags, 24 cities banning bags, all of these things. And so you can't overstate the importance of state and local action, because those are the building blocks for national policy. And the other thing I was going to add on that is, when we have these opportunities, like Shane said, there are a lot of competing interests, but I can't say enough about how important it is to pay attention to what your elected is doing on the issues that matter to you. So like, if they don't vote yes on the bill that you care about, you should know that and tell them you know that. On the same token, or whatever, flip whatever that phrase is, thank them when they do. That goes such a long way of like, hey, I saw you voted yes on the bag ban. I know that that's a tough vote. Thank you. So Shane is right. I mean, they work for you. That literally they work for you. And I think it's always important to remember that, and to remember that your voice is so amplified at the local and state level, and you deserve to have it heard. Bridget, do you have anything?
Yeah, I do actually. I really loved this part. Actually, it reminded me of a webinar that I did last week with Washburn University out of Topeka. And it was an Earth Day event, of course, because it's Earth Month. And we're taking the whole month at least. But it was one of those things where a lot of students were like, well, what do we do? And, you know, it was one of those points, and I think Shane really brought it up great of, you know, you just show up to those events and, or, you know, show up to testimonies and hearings. And I know that it's incredibly intimidating because there is a process a lot of the times, but if you sit through one, you'll figure out the process and just keep showing up. And so I just loved all of that incredibly. So thank you so much, Kate and Shane, about that. So we are going to start getting to, I think we could all probably talk for hours, but we don't want to do that. We're going to start getting to guest or audience questions. Again, if you are on Facebook Live, please put it in the comment section on Facebook. And then also if you're on the Zoom webinar, just stick it in the Q&A in the chat. And so for the first one, I'm sorry, I have to read off my phone. It says, for Pat and Shane, when you were kids, did you handle your trash differently than we do today? Meaning, were there more things you reused, etc.? I've heard like, I've heard when people used to eat at fast food places, the drink bottles would be returned to the counter, things like that. I don't know if one of, yeah, Pat, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, since I'm the old one here, but you know, that's true. I mean, you watch the movies and you see that people would have, you know, dinner and nothing would be plastic. It just wasn't something, you know, the bottles, you could get soda bottles in glass cases, and it would be like bringing back the milkman, you know, and they would deliver the glasses. You put the glasses back when you're done and they would pick them up. And so, and that was just what they did. And it wasn't, you know, this plastic was just ridiculous. And I would say that it was my generation, the boomers, that started, it was a marketing campaign, this throwaway society. So I'm a firm believer that we can turn this around, you know, make everything back to reuse. And it's an important stage. But yes, plastic was just not a thing, you know, and it can be that way again. And it's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Yeah, and I mean, similar situation with me. It's not like people are asking for these changes. They're happening incrementally over time, but there's a reason for it. You know, you see as the fluctuation in the oil prices globally happens, then you see the percentage of profits on plastic shift. Right now, oil is low, right? So more of the profit is coming from plastic, and it's a great time for the oil and gas industry to produce more things out of plastic. And then you see it happening. A few years ago, this is for any generation, anybody on this call remembers when you could get spinach that wasn't in a clamshell, you know? Who asked? Who said, hey, this should be put in clamshells? I want my spinach in a clamshell. Nobody said that. It just started showing up that way. And suddenly we're using more plastic to eat some leaves. And you expand that over all these different products. And that's just, it's been happening over the years. So I don't know. This is a policy failure at the top level, and we need to switch towards more producer responsibility, and we need more regulation, not less, in if we're going to do anything about the environmental crisis that we're in.
Yeah, that's great. I'm pretty sure that Kate was actually the one who taught me that plastic bags weren't even in existence until like the 70s, I believe, which is bonkers. We had a question on Facebook that I'm just going to touch on really fast. And Shane and Pat, if you have anything from your organization, please add. But I'm just going to say from the Public Interest Network, Lynn asked, are environmental groups working hand in hand with the upcoming infrastructure bill? And I just wanted to say that Environment America has been working excessively this past week. We've been setting up lobby meetings to sit down and talk with federal senators and representatives that we think can really push forward great infrastructure policies. So we're all very excited about the infrastructure plans. And so we're looking forward to it. I don't know, Shane and Pat, if either one of your organizations have been working on that as well.
I don't know about you, Pat, but Trash Free Maryland, we're a little too localized. So we aren't, we're just dealing with Maryland policy right now.
Right, and I only have the bandwidth for plastic. So I am working very hard on the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, which has so many wonderful components to it. And I just want to give a little shout out that we actually got Senator Van Hollen to co-sponsor it, which he did not the first time. So that was a big get for us. So please call your senators and encourage them to co-sponsor the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act, because that would make our lives so much easier, guys.
Absolutely. Yeah, I kind of had assumed, not to say that I knew, but your all's answers. I just wanted to flag that I know that Environment America isn't the only group, but we are working really hard on this infrastructure bill. And then one more question for Lisa. I think our audience wants to know what are your plans, if you have any. I know it's hard when you're in your early 20s. Trust me, I didn't actually find my wheelhouse. I think we can all kind of say that until much later in life, but I think the audience would like to know, since you just graduated, do you feel yourself continuing in the environmental advocacy world, or is this, I mean, I feel like once you learn about environmental degradation, it's just like a nightmare that you're always going to have, but I think that our audience would like to know what are next steps for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do not have a specific plan, but I think that, you know, right now I'm working on a lot of issues with the student perks. And I think what I foresee in my future is going more specifically into environmental issues. And so I think I could foresee going more into specifically environmental nonprofits, or doing, you know, sustainability planning. There are a lot of options. I wish, if you have any advice, let me know. But I would be shocked if I did something with my life that was not working on environmental protection and advocacy. I don't know if it means being in politics, or just being in like nonprofits and helping to like organize and engage people. And I don't know if that's a disappointing answer to people, but I don't have a specific like 5-year plan.
Nobody does. I don't know what my tomorrow looks like, so don't worry about it. And I think you're just speaking to how we started this off, which is there's no wrong way. Whatever you decide, and you might do one thing for a few years, then do another thing, and you know, you have that guiding mission, and that's what matters. So we're going to end now with one question that we always end with, and you can answer it as short as you want. But these conversations have been so amazing because we get to hear from people like you, and we've got audience, you know, national audience that comes on. They're here because they care. Generally, you come on to something called Conservation Conversations because you're like, I would like to learn about this. So what is, you know, one thing, either you can say one thing that you hope people take away from this, or one ask that you have for people, one thing you want them to go do after this. So you can take either side of it. And let's go in reverse order. So Lisa, what do you hope people take away, or what do you want them to go do right now after listening to this?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I'm taking away is that everybody, no matter what your generation is working on this. And so I think, something that as a young person, it's easy to be like, nobody before us has done anything on the environment and it's us that we're doing it. And I think it's a great, like, this conversation is so amazing because I think it shows like we are united in this and nobody should feel isolated, like our generation is the only generation working on this. And so that's really hopeful for me. And that's a cool takeaway I have.
Let's skip millennials and we'll go last, Bridget, so because I don't want to run out of time. Shane, what do you think?
This is a long haul issue, obviously. This is an intergenerational conversation, which speaks to that. I think an important takeaway that I've learned is if you're going to be it in the long haul, you can't take short-term outcomes too personally. There are going to be a lot of losses and some wins. Don't overthink the losses. Don't take it personally. Don't let your own happiness, your own relationships, whatever it is in your life, don't let it be affected by this. We're all working on this together, and we'll get there or not. But while we do it, you should be a happy person while this process is unfolding. So I think that's an important thing. I'm probably doing a little self-talk here because I only have a few days for us to get this plastic bag ban passed in Maryland, and it might not happen. And I don't want to be depressed for the rest of my life if it doesn't happen. And I won't. We'll be happy either way, and we'll get them next year. So that's the thing. There's always tomorrow. Well, until there's not, there's always tomorrow to get this work done. So don't put all of your hopes on one outcome in one defined moment.
Pat, words of wisdom.
Excellent point, Shane. And I feel like I already did my ask with asking everyone to call their senators and representatives to sign on for the bill, Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act. But if I could just, being the old one, if I can just give some pearls of wisdom, I would just say to be of this world and not in this world. And then you'll know what's important in life.
God dang it, Pat. I'm gonna have to go sit with that one for a while. Bridget, all of those are such good answers. And I think what it all speaks to that I'll say quickly is that, like Pat said, this isn't an issue that is separate from us. We are part of it in the most beautiful way. And so just remember, like Pat said, that this is a connection. This isn't us trying to fix this thing. This is us trying to be in right relationship with the land and each other. And that's a lot of work. So don't get bummed, like Shane said. Bridget?
Yeah, I'll just reiterate it. I think you all hit on it perfectly. It's, we live on this planet. Let's coexist on it with all the other creatures and land and everything. Again, no one individual can reverse climate change. So we all need to work together and have that people power to take on these massive industries that are polluting our planet. And I think that that's a really good point. But, also do your own part. We can all work together. But yeah, thank you all so much for joining us as panelists. This was a really very entertaining conversation. I really enjoyed it. I was talking earlier about how Kate and I had a really good time about playing on the stereotypes of generations. So I think that this was a great conversation to see that we're all working towards this goal of having a living planet that we can survive on. We all can. So I do want to end tonight with a rather sad note for myself, but not for my fearless co-host, Kate. Unfortunately, tomorrow will be Kate Breeman's last day with Environment Maryland. I know that a lot of her coalition partners are really sad about it as well, and I'm devastated. But I look very forward to what she's going to keep doing. I know she's still going to be in this fight, kind of like like the question to Lisa earlier. She, once an environmentalist, it's really hard to get out of it. And so I just wanted to give a big shout out to Kate because this will be her last conservation conversations, at least at this point. So thank you, Kate, so much for being my co-host and just being so clever and wonderful. And so I would love to hear a last note from you.
Oh gosh. Thank you so much, Bridget. And this last year has just been, I mean, it's been amazing. And I think when I came into this position, I had a lot of anxiety and fear. Like Shane said, it affected my life. I was very scared, and I was given the very nice nickname Killjoy Kate because I was constantly like, don't use that, put that down, that's toxic, you know, whatever. And over the course really of this last year, especially with conservation conversations, our best people are on the job, and we have to keep working for sure, but we're on it. And I just hope for all of you listening that you know, no matter what you're doing or how you're coming to it or what your passion in life is, that we're all environmentalists. And I'm just so grateful to this community and to all the people that have come on, because I see everyone looking at their corner of the world and thinking, how do I make this better? And people like Pat, Lisa, Shane, Bridget, you're all dominoes, right? And you're knocking over so many other people who now also care about this and want to do this. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for you all. And I hope you all stay in touch. All of our guests who've been with us, I see people on who were on a year ago, and I hope you'll stay in touch. And I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much again, Kate. And then also thank you to Pat and Lisa and Shane. If you like all of the work that we're doing, please consider a donation to Less Plastic Please, Osberg Students, Trash Free Maryland, Environment Maryland, and Environment Missouri. Thank you again so much, and stay tuned to future conservation conversations. So thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your evening.
And if you want links, I'm putting in Less Plastic. You have a website, Pat. Let me pull it up. Sorry. I'm putting in links. You can find Less Plastic Please also, and Trash Free Maryland on Twitter. Student Pergs, you can find them everywhere with T-Pen. But I wanted to put your all's websites in the chat for folks too.
Excellent. Yes, thank you again, everybody, and happy Earth Month.
Woohoo!
Hopefully we all have big Earth Day plans,
Do
Earth
it.
Month plans. Plant a tree every day of the month.
Every day.
All right, thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.